When Daniel moved into the narrow, tree-lined street in late autumn, the house across from his rented apartment caught his eye immediately. Its windows were covered from the inside with aluminum foil, the yard overgrown with weeds, the paint on the porch flaking in sheets. Nobody on the block spoke of it, at least not willingly. The mailman skipped its steps, leaving envelopes crammed sideways into the rusted box. At night, Daniel noticed the faintest flicker of light behind the foil, like a television on mute, but never any silhouettes. He asked his landlord about the place. The man only said, "Don't go bothering them. They like to be left alone." Then he changed the subject. Daniel wasn't a brave man by nature, but curiosity gnawed. By his second week, he started keeping notes in a spiral journal, recording the exact times he saw movement or when the faint glow appeared. Patterns emerged. Lights from 2:11 a.m. to 3:05 a.m. almost every night. A dragging sound across the wooden floor carried through the street whenever the wind died. On the 12th night, Daniel stood outside with a cigarette. The air was brittle, cold. A sudden scraping noise made him freeze. It came not from the house, but from the sidewalk between them. Looking down, he saw a folded piece of paper. Someone must have dropped it. The handwriting across the front said simply, "Help me." Inside his apartment, he unfolded it with trembling hands. The paper was lined, torn from a school notebook. The message inside repeated the phrase, written dozens of times in desperate, uneven script. Near the bottom, one line read, "He keeps me in the walls." Daniel barely slept. At dawn, he considered calling police, but what could he say? That a stranger's note blew conveniently to his feet? Instead, he slipped the paper into his journal. That evening, lights flickered earlier than usual, and this time, faint tapping echoed, deliberate, patterned. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. Days blurred. Daniel's work suffered. He arrived late, distracted. His coworkers noticed the dark crescents under his eyes. Each night, the knocking grew louder, sometimes migrating from one window to another. Once, at 2:45 a.m., a whisper bled through the glass, "Look." Against his better judgment, Daniel crossed the street. He stood before the door, heart hammering. Up close, the smell hit him, metallic rot, like pennies left in damp earth. The knob felt warm to the touch. Before he could turn it, a shadow shifted behind the foil-covered window. A face pressed against the gap where foil had peeled away. It was gray, too thin, lips torn and stretched, and the eyes, blood-rimmed, pleading. Daniel stumbled back across the road. He convinced himself it was a trick of exhaustion. But the note's words repeated, "He keeps me in the walls." The next evening, a storm knocked out power across the block. Rain lashed sideways. For the first time, the opposite house was visible inside, foil stripped by the wind. Daniel lit a candle and stared. What he saw made his stomach turn. A narrow hallway, lit by dozens of mismatched lamps, cords running along the floor. The walls were carved with scratch marks, frantic and overlapping. A door creaked open. A figure emerged, tall, gaunt, wrapped in a stained butcher's apron. The man carried something limp over his shoulder. He thought it was a rolled carpet until an arm swung free. The figure dragged it down the hall, vanishing into a side room. Then the lamps flicked off at once, plunging the house into blackness. Daniel called emergency services, voice shaking. 2 officers arrived within 10 minutes, their cruiser lights flashing across the wet pavement. They knocked, announced themselves, circled the property. After 15 minutes, they returned. "Vacant," one officer said. "No power, no sign of anyone inside. Probably squatters came through." Daniel argued. He described the lights, the man, the body. The officers exchanged a look, then warned him about filing false reports. They left. That night, Daniel couldn't bear the silence. He sat awake until 3 a.m. Nothing. At 3:07, the knocking returned, this time from inside his own apartment walls. He tore apart the plaster with a hammer, convinced someone had tunneled through. Dust choked him. Behind the wall, he found only insulation and wood beams. Yet the knocks continued. His journal pages filled with shaky writing. Not crazy, not crazy. He keeps them everywhere. Food rotted in the fridge. Work called twice, then stopped. Daniel locked himself in, curtains drawn, watching the house. On the 19th night, he saw movement again. A pale arm reached from an upstairs window, waving frantically, before being yanked back. He ran into the rain, across the road, pounding the door. It swung inward without resistance. The stench was overwhelming. Rotten meat, ammonia, mold. The hallway was exactly as he'd glimpsed, lamps lining the floor, cords tangled like veins. The scratch marks were deeper here, gouged to the studs. "Hello?" His voice cracked. "I saw you. Are you hurt?" From deeper inside came a sound like dragging chains. He followed, shoes sticking to the warped boards. He passed doorways where rooms were stuffed with mattresses against the walls, stained dark. Some mattresses bulged unnaturally. One twitched. Daniel staggered backward. A whisper hissed from behind him. "You came." He turned. The tall man stood there, apron soaked, hands gloved in red. His smile was thin and crooked. "They always come," the man said. Daniel ran, but the hall seemed longer, stretching. Doors opened on either side, thin figures crawling, faces gray, eyes wide, mouths muttering, "Help me," in broken chorus. Hands clawed at his clothes. He reached the front door, but it slammed shut, bolts sliding into place on their own. The man advanced slowly. "You heard them. Now you belong to the walls too." Neighbors found Daniel's apartment weeks later. Rent unpaid, mailbox overflowing. Inside, dishes molded in the sink, journals scattered across the floor. The final entry read only 3:07 a.m. In the walls now. The house across the road looked the same as ever. Foil sealed the windows again. When asked, neighbors shrugged. They said, "Been empty for years." But at night, though, if you walk that street and pause, you might hear it. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. And if the wind is still enough, a whisper, "He keeps me in the walls."